Hey guys, Corey with Faymus Media. Today we're looking at the D5500. So the Nikon D5500, first when I heard of it, I thought, wait a minute, did we get stuck in a time warp or a time loop somewhere? What happened to the 5400? Maybe it's because Nikon's moving so fast that we just missed it. The 5400 has come and passed since the 5300 has come out last year. It's crazy, but here we are. What are the differences of the D5500 versus the 53? That's a good question. Very few, if any. The only real two differences is this has a touchscreen, whereas the 5300 does not. And this also doesn't have GPS. The GPS function has been removed and there are benefits to that. One of them is more shots. On average, about 150, 175 more shots is what I've been able to get out of this camera versus the D5300 on the same charge, on the same battery, on the same day, and the same temperature. So overall, more life out of the battery with a touchscreen, pretty much the same camera. Now here's the question a lot of people are probably going to ask. If you have a 5300, is this worth the upgrade? Well, that's subjective. If you don't really need a touchscreen and you don't really want the extra battery life, then no. So for most people who have a 5300, you can kind of skip on past this possibly, most likely. Now, if you have a D5200 and you're looking at upgrading to the 5300 or the 55, this is worth the extra $100. It's like $796 versus $696. So if you are looking to upgrade from your D5000, 5100, or even 5200, this would be the better buy overall, unless you need GPS. And then you could save some money and get the 5300. But for anybody with the 5300, you might want to skip past it, but we're going to take a look at it and see how it performs. I do expect it to perform identical. Same focusing system, the 4800 multicam. It's got the 3.2-inch rear touchscreen, which that's the only difference really in the screen is that it's touch. 24 megapixel DX sensor. So I expect the low light performance to be nearly identical unless they've tweaked the algorithms a little bit, but we're going to find out. 100 ISO all the way up to 25,600 expandable. So it'll also do video, of course, as with the D5300, it'll do 60p and 1080. One thing I noticed, it doesn't do 720 unless you're doing 60 frames. Not really a deal breaker, but weird. I'd kind of like to have 30 frames and 24 and 720 in case I'm shooting something on it and it doesn't require 1080. But let's face it, these days you're shooting at 1080 almost all the time. In fact, almost everybody's shooting 4K by now. But the difference between the cameras is also noted here is that the body style is completely different. So another thing that I should mention is this camera is about 60 grams lighter than the D5300. So it does feel a little bit lighter, although I do have the 24-70 on it, so it's not that light. But it's time to put this thing to work. Let's stop talking. Let's see what the D5300 can do, and let's take a look here in Manhattan. It's a beautiful day. It's like 49 degrees, and can't beat it. It's been snowy and cold and I've been hibernating all winter. So let's take a walk. So another thing to let you guys know, when you're using the camera, you got to hold the exposure compensation button and change the rear dial. That'll change your aperture while you're shooting. And every time you place your face up to the screen, it'll shut the screen off. You move away, the screen will come back on unless you have it set to off or you invert it and flip it in. Of course, you cannot change the aperture in live view. Yet again, Nikon, that would have been a great reason to charge more for this camera and release it. However, you're giving us another incremental update on the D5300. Don't you think by now it's time to get aperture and live view in these cameras? I would think so, considering Canon's got the T5i and it will do that and it's relatively the same price. Granted, this is a better photographer camera, in my opinion, in many ways, but this feature is killing these cameras. We need aperture control and live view. If you've got to put something in the body and make it a little bigger and charge more, do it. We already know the motor is missing inside. Let's get this in the D5600 next year, please, Nikon. I'm sure everybody here watching this video is going to want that to come to the next camera, so let's do it. Of course, I'm shooting in RAW, 6000 by 4000 14-bit. Really good for a camera that's under, $800. The focusing system seems to be relatively the same as the D5300. There'd be no real way for me to tell a huge difference. So the D5300 and D5500 seem to be about the same in performance as far as autofocusing. Unless the difference was pretty huge, which there's no way it is, I would not really be able to tell a difference. Just overall feels like a D5300 with the addition of a touchscreen. If you want to change the ISO settings, you just hold the FN button here and turn the rear dial, and you can adjust it like that. I'm going to shoot here at 400 ISO. You hit info on the screen right here, and I'm just going to go in here and pull up. You want to change your autofocus type. Right here is continuous, single point, automatic, or manual focus. I want to have AFC on when I'm tracking people on the streets. You just go back. You can change how many autofocus points you want to use. You can use single, 9, 21, 39, 3D. 3D is really, really good. I can't believe a camera at this price level has the 3D tracking. So this is the Multicam 4800 autofocusing system, which is very similar, if not identical, to the D610. I've used them side by side and they seem to be pretty much on par, although the D610 seems to focus a little snappier than this does. But for the price range of this camera, the focusing system is definitely one of the pluses. So now I've got my continuous focusing on. There we go. So the 24-70 that I'm using right now is the equivalent of a 36-105 on a 1.5 crop. It's good for getting that reach. Dynamic range is as good as any other Nikon camera. Feels great in the hands. Not much to really talk about considering it's almost identical with the exception of this flippy touchscreen. You know, you could do self-portraits. That'd be a lot of fun. You're sitting here walking down the street like, hey, look at me. Doing auto burst mode, taking pictures of me everywhere I go. Like, I mean, that's a great thing to have, I guess. Watch out. No, just kidding. Bugging the videographer as always. Johan is gonna get even with me at some point. Now the fact that this is 24 megapixel and has no anti-aliasing filter, which is the same as the D5300, is really a good thing too, because most consumer cameras have aliasing filters. All the Canons do, except the new ones that are going to be coming out. So that's another good plus to it, I suppose. The real only downfall of the camera is it doesn't have aperture control in live view, which I really wish it would. Nikon's been procrastinating with this feature for God knows how long, and it's just getting ridiculous. They need to add this into the camera at some point in the future because the Canons have it, and that's why most video shooters shoot on Canon on the lower level cameras, is because of that. In fact, there's just more people shooting video on Canon anyway, but that would really help Nikon if they would just implement some more features for video, and that being one of the most key important things to do is the aperture control in live view. $19 degrees last week, and this whole week's gonna be in the 40s and 50s, so we're back at it. You're gonna see a lot of me and Johan. Maybe I'll even get him in some of the videos, and we'll have a lot of fun. Got some more reviews coming up, so we're gonna have a lot of fun this year. Did we get stuck in a time loop somewhere, like I've already said? Now, where's the D5400? Because I would really like to know where that camera is. Are we really moving so fast in the consumer camera lineup that the D5400 has already been released and already moved on to the D5500? Has this already happened? Let's see if we can find out where the D5400 is, because I think they're moving so quickly it's already come and passed. So if the D5400 has come to pass, why is it the 5500 has only got 2 minor changes from the 5300? Why would they skip 2 levels, 53 to 55, and make very minimal changes? I'm confused by this, I don't know. Maybe I'm talking about it too much. I just find it weird how they just completely skip. It's like 1, 2, 3, oh hell, 5. 4 is not even a number anymore to Nikon, I guess, I don't know. Gotta love the snow on the sidewalk here. Cars parked on 2 feet of snow on the side of the road, it's pretty crazy. I couldn't even get my car on the snow. For a prosumer don't you just love how people dodge the camera? You can see people dodging all over the place, like, whoa, there's the camera, get it out of my face. Well, not really, only a few. Most people around here are used to it. I'm gonna go out in the street and risk my life. And you can use the dial to change where your focus points are on the right, where the OK button is. I also like the button on the front, which has got where you can change your burst, single shot, high continuous, low continuous. Also your timer and remote controls all right there. The flash sync button on the side as well. Overall, pretty accessible camera. All the buttons are easily available on either side of the camera. Doesn't make things too complicated. Waffles and Dingus truck. Great place to eat if you ever are in Manhattan or Brooklyn. Very famous too. So we're here at Waffles and Dingus, world famous waffles, known, they're all over Brooklyn, Manhattan, they move around. You gotta try to catch a truck if you're ever in New York City. This is one of the places that you must stop. Very, very popular, check it out. If you're ever in Manhattan, Brooklyn, anywhere, look for the truck. If you see it, stop and get something to eat.
As you see, this is the Liège waffle, which is soft, sweet and chewy. And inside of the waffle has like kernels of sugar. Called like sugar beet, which is melting, caramelizing in the iron. As you see, all this caramelized sugar is going to be on the top of the waffle, and it's nice and chewy.
We're famous for the hot dog vendors on the side of the roads and these food trucks, especially Waffles and Dingus is just one of many in New York City that is absolutely fantastic. So you must check them out. You gotta be careful in March when all this snow melts. You just walk into a ocean anywhere. You just be walking on the sidewalk and you're knee high in dirty water. which is an absolute brilliant thing to have in a consumer camera. Flat is just a beautiful picture. Now, for video, this camera is surely better than the D5300 because the D5300 didn't have the flat profile. I would say that it's definitely worth the upgrade if you're shooting video. You can see the sky in the background isn't blown out. It's just very flat, great dynamic range. Now the thing is, if this camera did have, if it did have aperture control in live view, then this would probably be the best bang for buck Nikon to shoot video on. The reason is because the flat picture profile looks to me to be every bit as good as the D750 or the D810, but it's so much cheaper. $800, sub $800 versus $3,200 or $2,200. If this had aperture control in live view, then it would probably be a go-to camera for video. It's the one thing that I would say that if you're shooting video and you got a D5300, it's worth the upgrade. Probably the best consumer camera Nikon's ever released for video. It just, aperture control in live view. It's gonna give me a headache just thinking about it. Aperture control in live view, Nikon, let's get that fixed. ASAP. I'm trying to see if I can capture the pigeons flying away in slow-mo. Capture it at 60 frames. They're not even scared of us. Isn't that crazy? They just walk around us. They won't fly away when you get up close. See if I can get these pigeons to move and capture it in 60 frames. We'll see it in slow-mo. There we go. Excellent. I'm going to switch over now to 24p. Going to go up to f16. Just brilliant dynamic range. The flat picture profile is amazing. For any users that have the 5100, 5200, or 5300, and you've liked the D810 and D750 for video and its flat picture profile, this is the camera for you. This is the one. The 5500 has got the great video features of the D810 and the D750, so this would be the camera for you. So we're gonna look at the front of the camera for the settings. This is your flash compensation button, or also to pop up flash. Your FN button used to change your ISO settings. This is to release your lens. And this is also your timer, remote settings, or your continuous low, high, or single frame mode right here. That's the button for that. And you can change the setting with a dial. Your remote, your mic, and your AV out on the side under this rubber flap. In the back, you got the flip screen, which is also touch with the D5500. Your info button to bring up the settings on the information screen here. And also your OK button, your dial, your trash, and this is your in and out zoom for, like, you know, pixel peeping and accurately getting focus. Your menu button is on the left right here, but we're not going to get into the menu because the menu is very similar to all Nikon cameras, if not the same, except this one right here. Movie settings, you're going to go down here to manual movie settings. Make sure to put that on so you can adjust your aperture, otherwise you'll be stuck and locked out completely. Of course, you got your info button right here. If you want to reset all your settings, you're going to hold your menu and your info button, and that will allow you to reset the settings on the camera. So this is your rear dial. It changes your shutter. If you hold the FN button, it'll change your ISO. If you hold the exposure compensation button, it'll change your aperture, which of course you can't change in live view for video. This is your setting to go from auto, manual, aperture, shutter priority, or full auto. Of course, your record button and your shutter button. And on this side, you've got your HDMI out and of course, your SD card slot. So, on to the fun stuff, ISO low light test, and of course, anything below 3200 ISO is a waste of time. You're gonna have to hire a forensic technician and bust out the magnifying glass, and you're not gonna find any noise whatsoever. It's not until about ISO 6400 that you're gonna notice any sort of noise, and at that point the camera's starting to beg you, hey, watch it on the ISO, it's getting a little too hot in here. By the time you reach 12,800, the camera's pleading with you, please turn the ISO down, I don't wanna die. By the time you get to 25,600, the camera keels over and dies, and you're left with a piece of sandpaper with dust and all kinds of crud all over it. But hey, let's face it, you pushed it. Okay, on to the low light test in video mode. Pretty much similar results to the photos that we took in the same room in the exact same spot. Only a little bit of light coming through the windows. The room is fairly dark, and as you can see, even at ISO 800 and 1600, there's no noise whatsoever. By the time we get to ISO 3200, there's a little bit of noise in the midtones, but not much. The image is fantastic. By the time we get to ISO 6400, the D5500 is asking you why you keep pushing the limits of the camera and begging you to turn it down before it dies. We get over to ISO 12,800, the noise is getting pretty bad in the shadows. The highlights not too bad, but it's the brink of usability, and by 25,600, you just didn't listen. Look at the image. It looks like sandpaper everywhere. Somehow Nikon doesn't know how to count very well, and we end up skipping the 5400 altogether. But all kidding aside, the D5500 may only have a few minor changes, but those minor changes are actually pretty welcomed. There's no GPS, which may be a benefactor to some, and it may also be a problem for others. However, the battery life is quite a bit better, and you get about 150 to 175 more shots, maybe even more than that. The D5500 also includes a touchscreen, which performs beautifully, and for video shooters, the flat picture profile is nothing short of brilliance. It may only be a few incremental updates in this camera from the D5300, but if you're shooting video on the D5300, this is a critical update for you guys with the flat picture profile for shooting video. If you're coming from a D5200 or D5100 or even a D5000, this is definitely the one you want. Skip right past the D5300. So such minor changes in this camera may not be as groundbreaking as you'd expect, but the Nikon D5500 is the best consumer camera in Nikon's lineup. In fact, it's the best consumer camera in its class of any brand. So guys, the Nikon D5500 is a very small incremental update to the D5300, but it updates what counts, especially for videographers with the new flat profile, makes the video features of this camera much better than the D5300, much more dynamic range, much more usable image that can be color graded. Now, if you don't shoot video at all, this camera may not be the worthy upgrade for you if you have a D5300. Now, one thing's for certain, if you have a D5000, D5100, or D5200, this camera's worth the upgrade no matter what. The only real benefit to this camera over the 5300 if you're only shooting photography is the touchscreen and the lack of GPS, which may hurt some people because they may want the GPS feature. Where the benefit for this camera really is the video features. If you really shoot video on your D5300, this is a much more solid video camera than the D5300. So if you have that camera, you're shooting video, you get touchscreen, no GPS, the battery will last longer on your video shoots, and it also has the flat profile. Clearly, this is definitely bonuses for anybody who shoots video, making the D5500 the must-have upgrade to the D5300, mainly for video shooters. Unless, of course, you must have a touchscreen. Now, moving away from the camera, what's happened to the D5400? We must have missed it. I don't know what planet I've been on for the last 9 months to a year, but me and Johan don't know where the 5400 is, and I wonder if Nikon does either. But the D5500 is a great camera, you can't go wrong. Thanks so much for your support, guys, and subscribing. If you haven't subscribed and you're watching this video, please do so. And don't forget to support all the videos that I got coming out, to support the channel. If you want to purchase this camera or the 24-70 lens or any of the gear I review, please use the links in the information box below. Keep the channel alive. I'm Corey with Faymus Media, and happy shooting.